Welcome, everybody. We're going to wait just a minute to get all the participants on. Well, welcome, everybody. It's good to see familiar names and people here and some new people. I'm Merit Cudkowicz from the Healey Center at Mass General Hospital here with Dr. Paganoni and Allison Bula and Catherine Small. And we have a special guest, Dr. Daragh Heitzman, who is one of our leading sites and close colleague and friend and an ALS physician, to get to know you guys and for you to have a chance to ask them some questions. So just a reminder, we're talking about the ALS platform trial. This is really a collaborative effort from many groups to fund this, to develop this, to get this off the ground so that we can really accelerate how we're developing treatments for people with ALS. Next slide, please. So I really want to, it's just a pleasure to have Dr. Heitzman here from Texas Neurology. He was, he has many things that he's famous for, but in this particular platform trial, he was the first site activated, the first one to enroll someone, and really a pioneer and provided great care for people in the study and his patients. So welcome, Daragh.
Well,
Daragh,
thank you.
Maybe we just pause here and maybe you could just tell us a little bit about you, your center, and your experience.
Sure. Do you want to go to the next slide? And if someone doesn't like my speaking. So I obtained most of my neurology training here in Texas, a fellowship at the Cleveland Clinic, trained under Hiroshi Matsumoto and Asa Wilborn, where I was exposed to ALS, research trials and clinical care. I came back to Dallas. I missed taking care of the ALS population, preferred that to general neurology. I, in the early 90s, went up to a meeting that Dr. Cudkowicz was hosting at the Holiday Inn. You remember, up on the top floor, and I told her that I'd like to be involved. And I think that was your second year of the NEALS meeting, and I've been part of that ever since. So we created an ALS clinic. I think we've been going since 2000. We're affiliated with the MDA and ALS Association. We were small and we've gradually increased in size, doing both clinical trials and then some observational trials and to a lesser degree basic science studies. Our recruitment's from this region of North and West Texas, and then to a lesser degree is Oklahoma, Louisiana, and Arkansas, and Mississippi. I've done about 30 trials in ALS, about 30 other trials in other disorders. We have a large research department, relatively, for a private practice group. We have 4 research coordinators. And for the HEALEY ALS Platform Trial, it's myself, Alan Martin, another neuromuscular doctor, then Dr. Nasri, who's a physician and also clinical research coordinator, and Todd Morgan. This is just a phenomenal trial to be participating in. I think I'm excited, and the Mass General and the NEALS group has just been great in sponsoring this and getting this going.
Thank you. And we'll have time for people to ask Dr. Heitzman some questions. As we do every time, we just give a little overview of the trial and update on enrollment for people who might be new and also for people coming back. So the idea here again is to speed up trial development by building an infrastructure that keeps going until we find effective treatments. We're now testing 4 drugs. We have done webinars on their mechanism of action that are taped if people want to listen to them. We've designed this with a lot of info from people with ALS to be very patient-centered and centric, and also able to give a clear answer at the end of the study. So in the study, people who come into the study are randomized to one of the open treatments, and there's 4 right now, and then another randomization 3-to-1 active drug versus placebo. So 75% of people are on active drug for the 24 weeks, and then at the end of that 24 weeks, everybody has an option to go into the open label. which is where everybody gets the drug, until we know the results of that particular drug. So this is a model that we've borrowed from other fields that have really, when you have a big pipeline of drugs, found that they can accelerate treatments. Next slide, please. So we have 51 sites are actively enrolling. The list is found on our website, and also on the next slide, please. I wish I could say we added another site since last week, but we haven't. We of the 3 left of the 54, the one is super close, another one is medium close, and one is kind of far away. We are planning to add some additional sites, so based on feedback from many of you as well as sites, to try to get even broader geographic distribution. Next slide, please. So our current data is that 453 people have signed informed consent. And again, we're just so thankful for anyone and everyone who's been part of clinical trials, whether it's this trial or our biomarker study. This is how we're going to develop treatments. Of those 453 individuals, 344 have already been assigned to a regimen, 304 are getting treatment, active or placebo, and 70 have entered the open label extension. So this is some, again, progress from last week's update. Just a reminder, so each of the regimens, we're looking for 160 participants. Next slide. So we have these weekly webinars, and we're going to be inviting different speakers. We're going to have a whole series on statistics and why trials are designed a certain way, and keep bringing people, some of the sites here to get to know you, and vice versa. As I mentioned, we did do science webinars for each of the drugs, and those are found on our website, and hopefully those are helpful. We will be bringing the new companies that are joining us, regimens E and F, shortly also to talk about their science. Next slide. I wanted to share center on this trial, all for Dr. Paganoni. She was very happy to be able to give some answers last week on some of their plans, but we are having a couple webinars about the center trial, as well as continuing to work with our colleagues at Niels about a drug development webinar series. We have 2 more coming up in May, and hopefully those are helpful. They're all recorded as well if people can't make them in person. Next slide. So we love ideas. The things that we are working on are webinar about biomarkers, one on statistics, and continue to get to know our sites. Next week, we'll have Dr. Locatelli from Holy Cross Hospital in Fort Lauderdale, also a top enrolling site. Next slide. Just a reminder to reach out to Catherine Small or Allison Bullock if you want any assistance on getting connected to a site. If any questions about the platform trial, they're here to help you, and are fantastic. Thank you. Next slide. And so I think we will move into the Q&A, which Dr. Paganoni will answer.
Yeah, and before we go there, yeah, thank you for mentioning the results of the AMX Center trial. I just wanted to make a correction that we changed the date for the webinar. So we will post the correct information when we share the slides, and we'll circulate that broadly. So please reach out to Catherine or Alison if you would like more information on that. There is a question, and for everyone on the line, please feel free to type questions as we speak so that we can take them. So one question, Merit, can you please clarify one point, because there might be some misinformation being passed on social media. That's the comment in the chat. Okay. Please confirm that all sites enroll all regimens, and the drugs they're on is based on randomization. And please confirm that there are no sites that are enrolling only 1 or 2 regimens.
Oh, sure. Yes. So the idea of the platform trial is that all sites offer all regimens. So all 51 of the sites are offering A through C. Because we added D afterwards, right now I believe we have 21 or 22 of the 54 centers are activated and enrolling also D, but eventually all 51 will. There's a little bit of delay for some of the sites because anytime we add a new regimen or new drug, we need to train the sites and make sure they're ready for that. But the goal is every site offers every regimen that's available.
Great. Then I wanted to actually ask a question for Dr. Heitzman. Can you tell us a little bit more what the enrollment process is at your site? Because I know Catherine and Alison receive a lot of questions about, what's the first step? Let's say that, one person is interested in joining the platform trial. What's the first step? Who should they contact? And obviously every site is different, but since we have you, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about what happens at your site, and maybe Catherine can comment.
Right. So in the past, this is before Healy, I think I'd say 90% of the patients that I saw, that were in our trials, I recruited from my own patient population. They just happened to be here. I would review their charts and offer them trials, occasionally getting someone interested in a trial over the years, dexpramipexole or the cytokinetic studies. When Healy became public, we've had many people searching this on the internet and then contacting us or contacting the ALS Association, MDA, and to get more information on how to be involved. We have sites around the country, or even outside the country, that are just want a Healy site. So we are being solicited by patients or families, can we participate? And I think that's probably now half our patient enrollment are coming through from the internet and just the publicity of Healy. And then I asked to review the records and make a decision. Are they a candidate right then? I always meet with the patient for an hour and a half beforehand to decide if they're an appropriate candidate. Looking at inclusion or exclusion criteria pre-screening. But if they need another EMG, do they need MRIs or lab work? I make that decision after reviewing the chart. Some come in with hardly anything done. Some have been to 3 or 5 centers with everything done, then I'm not going to repeat that. And just once they're here, to educate them. Some people don't want a shot for vaccination. They said, I'm not going to participate. Other people, logistically, they can't do it. Or it's a time commitment, or they're too ill. But I make that judgment beforehand, before they're screened.
Great. There's a question for you again about whether you take patients from Mexico or Latin America, and in general, again, I think it's good to answer the question about international participants, because we've been getting that a lot.
Yeah, we've had a handful of people from Mexico, Belize, Argentina, Colombia, asking to come. I think I have to go through and say, is the English barrier, can we overcome that? Particularly regarding reading records. And most of the candidates have reviewed records, have had translations. And once we go over that hurdle and say if they're appropriate, it's a matter, can they make it here? In particular in times of COVID. For instance, I had someone here wanted to participate with Belize. Well, Belize was shut down. And I said, they're not an appropriate candidate. I think you'd have to have a lot of money or family that are here in this area to participate, to come back and forth. But I think it's taken on an individual basis.
Yeah, and maybe Merit, do you want to comment on the international patient question in general, because it seems to have become a more common question recently?
Yeah, I think one important thing is that there's nothing in the protocol that excludes international patients. There have been other trials for logistical reasons that have had that restriction, but we don't have that restriction. And I'd say before COVID, probably it would have been easier for people, especially from Canada, to come to the northern sites, or Mexico and South America to the more southern ones. But I think COVID has made travel really difficult. So I think if somebody, just like Dr. Heichmann said, if after the review of the record, if someone's eligible and it is feasible for them to come back and be there at the visits, and also can be followed for safety, then it's allowed. But we're just in a difficult time with the COVID. I think as that gets better and travel resumes, it might be easier for people. The bigger thing we really need to do is get trials in international countries. Obviously, it happens in Europe and Asia and North America, but there are many parts of the world where there are no options for people. And I think Niels and other groups want to keep working on that so that people don't have to travel so far to be in trials.
Yeah, there's also an interesting question about the percentage of trial participants that are of Hispanic ethnicity. And I can say that I don't have the exact number off the top of my head right now, but as a general comment, we are actually looking, not at just this trial, but in general, ALS trials, we're doing a literature review because there seems to have been sort of a lower than expected percentage historically in ALS trials of people of Hispanic ethnicity or Black ethnicities. So essentially, we are trying to see how we can actually improve outreach and allow participation from a broader group of patients that might be interested. So I just wanted to mention that we are working in collaboration with other associations, and we received a grant from the Tambourine Foundation to really try to make our enrollment more diverse.
Yeah, it's, here in Dallas, where we have such a large Hispanic population, there's an underrepresentation in the clinical trial basis. And I think a lot of this is multiple factors, but primarily cultural, about where people seek their medical care.
Yeah, so it's interesting because we recently connected with colleagues from different hospitals in the city of Boston to try to improve in collaboration and access to care so that everyone can have access to research. Yeah, another question. There's a question about clarification of the numbers. I know that we share the numbers in the same sort of format every week. Perhaps we can go back to that slide. So the question about an understanding of the numbers. Are the 300 individuals receiving investigational drug part of the people that have been assigned to a regimen, or are they two separate groups? So I was wondering, Merit, if you could explain sort of the flow.
Yeah, they're part of that same group. There is a bit of a time lag. Like once somebody is assigned, let's say, to regimen A, they might need to go and get the vaccine for that particular one before they can wait 2 weeks before they can start the drug. So those numbers are always going to be a little different. But the 304 are part of the 344.
Right. So there's a comment about the fact that there seems to be differences among clinics. So the person who's asking the question says that at the previous clinic where it was seen, there seemed to be little information about research, and this person had to find the HEALEY platform trial himself, even if the clinic is known as a center of excellence. And so the question seems odd that some clinics are still centers of excellence but don't promote research. And so the general question is, how do we help with this problem? I don't know who wants to take this.
I'm happy to answer, but I don't know, Dr. Heitzman, if you wanted to.
Yeah, I've got an opinion. Yeah. So Rick Bedlack and I had to give a presentation about 10 years ago in Tarrytown. Rick Bedlack's at Duke. It was about trial recruitment. And one of my biggest point was it's dependent on the investigator, PI, what we call, so someone like me or any of us here on the call that are involved with patients to recruit patients at that center. So that's one, but the other is there's a big gap or variability among the different centers around the country. And I think that will improve. I think also MDA, the individual institutions, NEALS, we're striving to make that better, but we still have a ways to go.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I do think it's gotten harder because of the good news and that there's so many trials going on. There's so much research that it depending on a particular clinic and their staffing and their time for research, they might not know everything. But I do think that is exactly where the foundations can help. And I know IMALS has a great clinical trial website. I know the ALS Association does, but we need to be constantly kind of getting information out to the site so they can share it with their the people that they care for.
Yeah, there's questions about expanded access. So specifically, I wanted to ask Dr. Heitzman if you're offering expanded access at your site, and also Dr. Cudkowicz, maybe kind of a view of how we are thinking about, the expanded access program in a way to include more sites.
Not yet. And for two reasons, it was simply a manpower issue. It would be the time commitment to do that. I know Amylyx is not able to do that right now, but I anticipate that if the flow to get expanded access was easy, it will be done. I mean, most people will say that. And so I just haven't jumped in yet.
So as I know, a lot of people on the call know, we're trying to build a parallel, it'll be small, expanded access program to the platform trial. And we will be doing this with regimens B, C, and D. We haven't picked the sites for D, but we would be planning to go to sites just like Dr. Heitzman, who are enrolling well, have the staff for it, and are geographically, dispersed. But the bigger really opportunities on expanded access are for the drugs like Dr. Heitzman mentioned, like Amylyx, where we already know have a positive trial. And often those companies can provide drug for more than 20 or 30, more like hundreds of people. And we're obviously working with a lot of people to see how we could make that happen.
Great. And going back to the previous topic about the enrollment numbers, there's another question about sort of the specifics of the numbers. So 304 people are currently on investigational product, active or placebo. And the question is, what is the breakdown by regimen?
Oh, sure. It's a great question. And we can add that perhaps on our next webinars. Yeah. It's roughly the same between A, B, and C. A is always a little behind because it has the 2 weeks of vaccination. So I think it's like in the high 90s to later, but we'll get, we can put some exact numbers out there in another slide.
Great. Then I know we have a few more minutes, and I wanted to ask both of you, Dr. Cudkowicz and Dr. Heitzman, are you optimistic about future treatments?
Oh, yeah. If you look, and this is one way of looking at of publications, it is going up like this, and it's very hard to, from a clinician, to keep up with the knowledge base from the genetics, molecular biology. It's the information that's out there is incredible, but the number of putative agents that could potentially help ALS is just escalating. And I know that's reviewed by the NEALS scientific board. And so we have all these potential besides what's there, but there are many in the background that could be tried. And so I'm very excited about the future.
Yeah, me too. I think we're in such a different space now in ALS where the science is just exploding. I'll just give, I'll be very brief, but two things. One is, as Daragh mentioned, we have a scientific advisory board. They used to maybe meet with companies twice a year, a few. Now it's like every week there's a different company coming for advice around trial design or preclinical models. There's just so many companies developing treatment that gives me a lot of hope. The other thing is all of a sudden being an ALS physician's a hot commodity. I'll just say that in the 90s when I was going into this field, I was kind of told there was no career and there are no jobs in it. Now everybody's trying to recruit all of us. But none of us are going anywhere. But that, I mean, there's just so many companies and institutions that want to study ALS that it's a good sign and it's hopeful.
Yeah. Have one last question that's sort of a common question that we are receiving is about the decision to join the open label extension at the end of the trial. So essentially, as you know, after a double-blind placebo-controlled portion of the trial, people have the opportunity to opt and enter the open label extension. And so Daragh, can you tell us, how do you speak with your participants about this? Because obviously it's still a difficult decision. It's a great opportunity, but it's also a difficult decision. So what type of questions do people ask, or how do you help them make that decision?
Yeah. I don't think I'm giving them that much guidance, but the majority of patients who have already participated are enrolling into the open label. There have been a minority with whether it be the progression of disease or they feel that it wasn't helping that drop out. I tell patients, in most patients ALS, they're wonderful. They want to help the cause. They just on their own and their family say, let's go ahead and do this. Even though they're aware if they qualify, they could switch over to another regimen. I've had one person drop out and want to pursue another trial elsewhere, but that's just one person. So I just think most people said, this may be helping, let's go. So I don't think I'm really advertising. Most of the patients are doing this on their own.
Any final thoughts, Merit or anyone else?
Just want to again thank everybody for being here with us and your advice and for being part of the study. One of the topics we want to bring up soon is what we call interim analysis, which is when we look at the data, or an independent committee looks at the data for safety and determination about going forward. And we thought that would be helpful to discuss, because we have one of those coming up soon. So we'll bring that to a future webinar.
Great. And I'm sorry, there's two more questions that just came in, maybe real quick. One question is, has there been a DSMB meeting on all the first 3 regimens? So again, sort of expanding on that, Merit.
Yes, they've met several times now, at the beginning, and then I think twice for safety review. We have another review coming up in June. So they meet about every 3 months. They see data monthly, but they meet every 3 months, and they give us kind of like go ahead or not go ahead. And so far they've been telling us to go ahead.
Great. And the last question is, how far along does a potential treatment need to be in order to become a HEALEY platform candidate? For example, Prostatin versus AMX35, and the common is, I realize AMX35 already had a separate trial. So how does that?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I call this more of the, it's an efficacy trial, which it's or what we call a registration trial, meaning that we're trying to determine if the drug works and is it safe. So treatments have to know the dose and already, kind of some preliminary safety, and really be ready for what's more of a late stage testing. So Prostatin, for example, would not be ready now. They haven't been in people yet, but once they have the initial dose finding and safety, then they could move into something like this. And Amylyx, in a way, is too far. They've already done a positive phase 2-3 study.
Yeah. And before we end, I just wanted to quickly take a couple of questions. I can just answer quickly. There's a couple of questions about inclusion-exclusion criteria. So feel free to call Catherine, and maybe you can put on the last slide that shows the link to look at the inclusion-exclusion criteria, as well as the how to contact Catherine or Alison for questions. But essentially, the 50% lung function is one of the criteria. People can use ventilators, meaning non-invasive ventilators or BiPAPs. That's not, so the criterion is the 50% lung function, not the use of ventilators or not. But in any case, to complete, and ask specific questions about your own situation, please call the number or email, and Catherine and Alison can help you review the eligibility criteria, which are also publicly available. And I guess we are at time. So I just wanted to thank Dr. Heitzman for joining today. Really great to see you as always. And thank you to all the other panelists. Any last words, Daragh, for us?
No, and just to thank you all the patients, and we're here to help you.
Thank you. Thanks everyone, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.